The night was cold, and the air smelled of metal and fear. The alien slave camp was silent, except for the occasional clink of chains and the low hum of energy fences. The guards, tall and menacing, patrolled the area with weapons in hand. They didn't expect anyone to be foolish enough to attack their fortress. But they were wrong. A shadow moved in the darkness, swift and silent. It was a human, dressed in tattered armor, his face hidden beneath a helmet. He moved like a ghost, slipping past the guards with ease. His mission was clear: free the prisoners, no matter the cost. In one of the cages, a group of alien girls huddled together, their eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. They had lost hope long ago, believing no one would ever come for them. But then, they saw him. The human soldier appeared out of nowhere, taking down two guards with a single, fluid motion. The girls gasped, their hearts pounding as they watched him work. He was fast, precise, and fearless. But what shocked them the most was the look in his eyes, determination, and something else. Something they hadn't seen in a long time. Kindness. "Stay close to me," he whispered, his voice calm but firm. "We're getting out of here." The girls hesitated, unsure if they could trust him. But when he broke their chains with a single strike, they knew he was different. This human wasn't like the others. He wasn't here to hurt them. He was here to save them. As they followed him through the camp, the alarms blared. The guards were onto them. The human soldier pushed the girls behind him, shielding them with his body as enemy forces surrounded them. The girls clung to each other, their hearts racing. Would this be the end? Or was this just the beginning? The human raised his weapon, his eyes locked on the enemy. "Stay behind me," he said. "No matter what happens, don't stop running." And then, the battle began. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the night as the human soldier fought off the guards. His movements were precise, each strike calculated to buy time for the alien girls to escape. The girls, still trembling with fear, followed his orders and ran toward the edge of the camp. But one of them, a tall alien with sharp, glowing eyes, hesitated. She turned back to look at the human, her mind racing with questions. "Why is he doing this?" she thought. "Why risk his life for us?" The human noticed her pause and shouted, "Keep moving. I'll catch up." Reluctantly, she obeyed, joining the others as they disappeared into the dense forest outside the camp. The human soldier fought his way through the guards, his body aching with every step. He was outnumbered, but he didn't care. He had made a promise to himself long ago, never to let the innocent suffer, no matter the cost. When the last guard fell, the human sprinted into the forest, catching up with the girls. They were hiding behind a cluster of tall, glowing trees, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. The tall alien girl stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why did you save us?" The human removed his helmet, revealing a face scarred by battles and hardship. His eyes were tired, but there was a fire in them that couldn't be extinguished. "I'm no one special," he said quietly. "Just a soldier who's seen too much suffering." The girls exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of him. The tall alien girl crossed her arms, her skepticism clear. "You expect us to believe that? Humans don't care about us. They've never cared." The human sighed, his gaze dropping to the ground. "Not all humans are the same," he said. "I was once like you, trapped, powerless, and alone. I know what it's like to lose everything." The girls fell silent, their curiosity growing. The human soldier sat down on a nearby rock, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his memories. "A long time ago," he began, "I was part of a human military unit. We were sent on a mission to a distant planet, but things went wrong. Our leaders abandoned us, leaving us to die. I was the only one who survived." He paused, his voice cracking with emotion. I wandered the galaxy for years, trying to find a purpose. Then I saw what was happening here, innocent beings being enslaved, their lives destroyed. I couldn't stand by and do nothing. The tall alien girl's expression softened, but she still wasn't convinced. And what do you expect from us in return? She asked. The human looked her straight in the eyes. Nothing, he said. I don't want anything from you. I just want to help. The girls exchanged glances again, this time with a glimmer of hope. The tall alien girl nodded slowly, her skepticism giving way to cautious trust. All right, she said. But if you betray us, you'll regret it. The human smiled faintly. Fair enough. As the group rested, the human began to explain his plan. They needed to cross a dangerous wasteland to reach safety, but it wouldn't be easy. The slavers would be hunting them, and the wasteland was filled with deadly creatures. We'll need to move quickly and stay together, he said. If we're separated, we're as good as dead. The girls nodded, their fear slowly being replaced by determination. For the first time in years, they felt a spark of hope. But as they prepared to leave, one of the girls, a quiet, timid one, spoke up. What's your name? She asked softly. The human hesitated, as if he hadn't been asked that question in a long time. You can call me the stranger, he said finally. The girls exchanged puzzled looks, but they didn't press further. They had more pressing concerns, like surviving the journey ahead. As they set off into the wasteland, the tall alien girl walked beside the stranger, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. You're not like any human I've ever met, she said. The stranger glanced at her, a faint smile on his lips. Maybe not, he said. But I'm not here to be a hero. I'm here to do what's right. The group continued their journey, each step bringing them closer to freedom, and closer to the dangers that awaited them. The wasteland stretched out before them, a barren expanse of cracked earth and jagged rocks under a blood-red sky. The air was thick with dust, and the distant howls of unknown creatures sent shivers down their spines. The alien girls huddled close together, their eyes darting nervously as they followed the stranger. He moved with purpose, his sharp eyes scanning the terrain for any signs of danger. The tall alien girl, who had introduced herself as Kayla, walked beside him, her glowing eyes narrowed in concentration. How do you know where we're going? She asked, her voice low but firm. The stranger didn't look at her, his focus on the path ahead. I've been here before, he said. This wasteland is a shortcut to the free zones. If we can make it through, we'll be safe. Kayla frowned. And if we don't? The stranger's jaw tightened. Then we don't. The group fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. They had no other choice. The slavers would be hunting them, and the camp was no longer an option. Their only hope was to trust the stranger and keep moving. As they walked, the girls began to open up about their pasts. One of them, a small alien with shimmering blue skin, spoke softly. I was taken from my home planet when I was just a child. I don't even remember what it looks like anymore. Another girl, with fiery red hair and sharp claws, clenched her fists. My family fought back when the slavers came. They didn't make it. The stranger listened quietly, his expression unreadable. He had heard stories like these before, but they never got easier to hear. Each one was a reminder of why he kept fighting, even when the odds were against him. After hours of walking, the group reached a narrow canyon. The walls were steep and jagged, and the only way through was a narrow path that wound its way to the other side. The stranger stopped, his eyes narrowing as he studied the terrain. This is where it gets dangerous, he said. Stay close, and don't make a sound. The girls nodded, their hearts pounding as they followed him into the canyon. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. Every sound, every rustle of wind, every distant echo, felt like a threat. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the canyon. The stranger froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The girls stopped behind him, their breath caught in their throats. What was that? Kayla whispered, her voice barely audible. The stranger didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on a dark shape moving in the shadows ahead. It was a creature, massive and terrifying, with glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws. "Stay back," the stranger said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll handle this." The creature lunged at him, its jaws snapping wildly. The stranger moved with lightning speed, dodging its attacks and striking back with precision. The girls watched in awe as he fought, their fear slowly being replaced by admiration. But the creature was strong, and it wasn't going down easily. The stranger knew he couldn't keep this up forever. He needed a plan, and fast. "Kayla," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "There's a weak spot on its neck. Aim for it." Kayla hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She picked up a sharp rock from the ground, her hands trembling but determined. As the stranger distracted the creature, she crept closer, her glowing eyes locked on its neck. With a swift, powerful motion, she struck. The creature let out a deafening roar, then collapsed to the ground, lifeless. The stranger turned to Kayla, a faint smile on his lips. "Nice shot." Kayla nodded, her chest heaving with adrenaline. "Thanks." The group continued through the canyon, their bond growing stronger with each step. They had faced danger together and come out stronger. But they knew this was only the beginning. As they reached the other side of the canyon, the stranger stopped, his eyes narrowing as he looked ahead. In the distance, they could see the faint outline of a slaver outpost. "We'll need to go around it," he said. "If they see us, we're done for." Kayla frowned. "How do we know they haven't already spotted us?" The stranger's expression darkened. "We don't. But we have to keep moving. We're running out of time." The group pressed on, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that the slavers were closing in. But they also knew they couldn't give up. They had come too far to turn back now. As they disappeared into the shadows, the slaver outpost loomed in the distance, a silent reminder of the dangers that still lay ahead. The group moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they skirted the slaver outpost. The stranger led the way, his eyes constantly scanning for any signs of movement. The alien girls followed closely, their hearts pounding with every step. The tension was palpable, and even the slightest sound made them jump. Kayla, the tall alien girl with glowing eyes, stayed close to the stranger. She had begun to trust him, but her instincts told her something was off. She glanced back at the other girls, noticing how one of them, a quiet, nervous alien with pale green skin, seemed unusually fidgety. "Are you okay?" Kayla whispered to her. The girl, whose name was Lyra, nodded quickly. "I'm fine. Just scared." Kayla studied her for a moment, then turned her attention back to the path ahead. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. They needed to keep moving. As they neared the edge of the outpost, the stranger held up a hand, signaling for the group to stop. He crouched low, his eyes fixed on a patrol of slavers walking nearby. "We'll wait here until they pass," he whispered. "Stay quiet." The girls nodded, their breaths shallow as they pressed themselves against the rocks. The patrol moved slowly, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. It felt like an eternity before they finally disappeared into the distance. The stranger stood up, motioning for the group to follow. "Let's go. We're almost." Before he could finish, a loud alarm blared through the air. The girls froze, their eyes wide with panic. "What's happening?" one of them cried. The stranger's face darkened. "They've spotted us. Run." The group sprinted through the rocky terrain, the sound of blaster fire echoing behind them. The slavers were closing in, their shouts growing louder with every second. The stranger stayed at the back, shielding the girls as they ran. But then, something unexpected happened. Lyra, the quiet alien girl, suddenly stopped running. She turned to face the slavers, her hands raised in surrender. "I'm here," she shouted. "Take me, but let the others go." The group froze, stunned by her betrayal. Kayla's eyes burned with anger. "Lyra, what are you doing?" Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke. "I can't keep running. They'll kill us all if we don't surrender. I don't want to die." The stranger stepped forward, his expression a mix of frustration and pity. "You don't understand. They won't let any of us go. This is what they do, they break you until you have nothing left." But it was too late. The slavers had already surrounded them, their weapons trained on the group. The stranger raised his hands, his mind racing for a way out. One of the slavers, a tall alien with a scarred face, stepped forward. Well, he sneered. "Looks like we've caught ourselves a hero." The stranger didn't respond. His eyes darted around, calculating his next move. He knew he couldn't fight them all, but he had to do something. The scarred slaver turned to Lyra, a cruel smile on his face. "You made the right choice, girl. But don't think this means you're free." Lyra's face fell, her hope shattered. She had thought she could save herself, but now she realized the truth, the slavers would never let her go. The stranger saw his chance. In one swift motion, he grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it at the scarred slaver, hitting him square in the face. The slaver stumbled back, giving the stranger just enough time to act. "Run," he shouted to the girls. "I'll hold them off." Kayla hesitated, her eyes filled with conflict. "We can't leave you." The stranger's voice was firm. "You have to. Now go." The girls turned and ran, their hearts heavy with guilt and fear. The stranger stood his ground, facing the slavers with nothing but his fists and his determination. The fight was brutal. The slavers outnumbered him, and their weapons gave them an advantage. But the stranger fought with everything he had, his movements fueled by sheer willpower. He took down several slavers, but it wasn't enough. In the end, they overpowered him. The scarred slaver, his face bleeding from the rock, walked up to the stranger and delivered a final blow. As the stranger fell to the ground, his vision fading, he thought of the girls. He hoped they would make it to safety. He hoped they would remember what he had fought for. And then, everything went black. The girls ran as fast as they could, tears streaming down their faces. Kayla's heart burned with anger, not just at the slavers, but at Lyra. She couldn't believe the girl had betrayed them. But as they reached a safe distance, Kayla stopped and turned to the others. "We can't leave him," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "He saved us. Now it's our turn to save him." The girls nodded, their fear replaced by resolve. They had lost too much to give up now. The girls hid in a small cave just beyond the slaver outpost, their breaths ragged and their hearts heavy. Kayla stood at the entrance, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. The others sat in silence, their minds racing with guilt, fear, and determination. Lyra, the girl who had betrayed them, sat in the corner, her face buried in her hands. She couldn't bring herself to look at the others. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought I was doing the right thing." Kayla turned to her, her expression hard but not unkind. "You made a mistake," she said. "But we don't have time for regrets. The stranger is still out there, and we're not leaving him behind." The other girls nodded, their fear slowly giving way to resolve. One of them, a fiery red-haired alien named Zara, stood up. "What's the plan? We can't just walk back in there." Kayla thought for a moment, her mind racing. "We need help," she said finally. There are others out there, other slaves, other prisoners. If we can find them, we can fight back. The idea was bold, but it was their only hope. The girls knew they couldn't take on the slavers alone, but together, they might stand a chance. As night fell, the group left the cave and began their search. They moved quietly through the wasteland, avoiding patrols and staying in the shadows. It wasn't long before they found what they were looking for, a hidden camp of escaped slaves, living in fear but still free. The leader of the camp, a tall alien with scars covering his body, eyed the girls warily. "Who are you?" he demanded. Kayla stepped forward, her voice steady. "We're like you. We escaped the slavers, but they took someone who saved us. We're going back to free him, and anyone else we can. Will you help us?" The leader hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "You're asking us to risk our lives for a stranger?" "He's not a stranger," Kayla said firmly. "He's the reason we're free. And if we don't fight back, the slavers will keep taking until there's no one left to take." The camp fell silent as the leader considered her words. Finally, he nodded. "All right. We'll help you. But this isn't just about your friend. This is about all of us." The girls smiled, their hope growing stronger. Together, they began to plan their attack. The next morning, the group set out for the slaver outpost. They moved as one, their determination unshakable. Kayla led the way, her mind focused on the task ahead. She didn't know if the stranger was still alive, but she refused to give up on him. As they neared the outpost, the group split into smaller teams, each with a specific task. Some would create distractions, while others would infiltrate the compound and free the prisoners. Kayla and Zara were part of the team that would go in after the stranger. The attack began with a loud explosion, courtesy of a makeshift bomb created by the escaped slaves. The slavers scrambled to respond, their attention diverted just long enough for the infiltrators to slip inside. Kayla and Zara moved quickly through the compound, their hearts pounding as they searched for the stranger. They found him in a dark cell, battered and bruised but still alive. "You came back," he said weakly, his voice filled with disbelief. Kayla smiled as she helped him to his feet. "You didn't think we'd leave you, did you?" The stranger's eyes softened, but there was no time for words. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the compound, reminding them that the fight wasn't over. "Let's go," the stranger said, his strength returning with every step. "We've got a rebellion to finish." The battle raged on, but the tide was turning. The escaped slaves fought with everything they had, their courage fueled by the hope of freedom. And at the center of it all was the stranger, his determination unshakable. As the sun rose over the wasteland, the slavers were finally defeated. The outpost was theirs. The outpost was in chaos. Fires burned in every corner, and the air was thick with smoke and the cries of the wounded. The escaped slaves had taken control, but the cost had been high. Bodies littered the ground, both slavers and rebels alike. The stranger stood amidst the wreckage, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. Kayla approached him, her glowing eyes filled with determination. "We did it," she said, her voice steady. "The outpost is ours." The stranger nodded, but his expression was grim. "This isn't over. The slavers' leader, he's still out there. And he won't stop until he's crushed us." Kayla's jaw tightened. "Then we'll crush him first." The group gathered in the center of the outpost, their faces weary but resolute. The stranger addressed them, his voice carrying over the crackling flames. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The slavers have taken too much from us, our homes, our families, our freedom. But today, we showed them that we're not afraid to fight back. And we're not going to stop until every last one of them is gone." The rebels cheered, their spirits lifted by his words. But they knew the hardest part was yet to come. The slavers' leader, a ruthless alien known as Vrax, had retreated to his stronghold, a massive fortress hidden deep in the wasteland. It was heavily guarded, with towering walls and advanced weaponry. But the stranger and the rebels had no choice. If they didn't take down Vrax, their victory would be short-lived. The journey to the stronghold was long and grueling. The wasteland seemed endless, its harsh terrain testing their endurance at every step. But the group pressed on, their determination unwavering. As they neared the stronghold, the stranger called for a halt. "We need a plan," he said. "We can't just charge in there. We'll be slaughtered." Kayla stepped forward, her sharp eyes scanning the fortress. "There's a weak spot on the eastern wall," she said. "If we can breach it, we might be able to get inside." The stranger nodded. "All right. We'll split into 2 teams. One team will create a distraction at the front gate, while the other team infiltrates from the east. Once we're inside, we'll take down Vrax and end this." The group agreed, and the plan was set into motion. The distraction team, led by Zara, launched their attack at the front gate. They used explosives to create chaos, drawing the guards' attention away from the eastern wall. Meanwhile, the stranger, Kayla, and a small group of rebels made their way to the weak spot. The breach was swift and silent. The stranger used his skills to disable the security systems, allowing the group to slip inside undetected. They moved through the fortress like shadows, their hearts pounding with every step. But as they neared Vrax's chamber, they were ambushed. A group of elite guards, armed to the teeth, blocked their path. "Looks like we've got company," the stranger muttered, raising his weapon. The battle was intense. The guards were well trained and heavily armed, but the stranger and the rebels fought with everything they had. Kayla's glowing eyes burned with fury as she took down guard after guard, her movements swift and precise. Finally, they reached Vrax's chamber. The slavers' leader stood at the center of the room, his cold eyes filled with rage. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You're nothing but insects to me. I'll crush you all." The stranger stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This ends now, Vrax. No more slavery. No more fear. It's over." Vrax laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're a fool if you think you can stop me." The two clashed in a brutal fight. Vrax was strong, his attacks fueled by years of cruelty and power. But the stranger was relentless, his determination unshakable. In the end, it was Kayla who delivered the final blow. As Vrax lunged at the stranger, she struck from behind, her weapon piercing his armor. Vrax fell to the ground, his reign of terror finally over. The fortress was theirs. The slavers were defeated, and the rebels had won. But the cost had been high. Many had fallen in the battle, and the scars of war would remain for years to come. As the sun rose over the wasteland, the stranger stood atop the fortress, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Kayla joined him, her expression thoughtful. "What now?" she asked. The stranger sighed. "Now, we rebuild. We create a new world, one where no one has to live in fear." Kayla nodded, a small smile on her lips. "We couldn't have done it without you." The stranger looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "And I couldn't have done it without you." The fortress, once a symbol of oppression, now stood as a beacon of hope. The rebels worked tirelessly to clear the wreckage and tend to the wounded. The air, once heavy with fear, was now filled with a sense of triumph and relief. But amidst the celebration, there was also grief. Many had lost their lives in the battle, and their sacrifices would not be forgotten. The stranger stood in the center of the fortress, his body weary but his spirit unbroken. Kayla approached him, her glowing eyes reflecting the light of the rising sun. "We've done it," she said softly. "The slavers are gone. We're free." The stranger nodded, but his expression was somber. "Freedom comes at a cost," he said. "We've lost too many good people. But their sacrifices won't be in vain. We'll build a new world, one where no one has to suffer like they did. Kayla placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. We couldn't have done it without you. You gave us hope when we had none. The stranger looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. And you gave me a reason to keep fighting. This victory belongs to all of us. As the days passed, the rebels began to rebuild. The fortress was transformed into a sanctuary for the freed slaves, a place where they could heal and start anew. The stranger and Kayla worked side by side, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. But even as they celebrated their victory, they knew their work was far from over. The slavers' empire was vast, and there were still others out there who needed their help. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the stranger gathered the group in the center of the fortress. The air was filled with a sense of anticipation as they waited for him to speak. We've come a long way, he began, his voice carrying over the crowd. But our fight isn't over. There are still others out there, others who are suffering, who need our help. We can't turn our backs on them. The group nodded, their determination unwavering. They had tasted freedom, and they were ready to fight for others to have the same. Kayla stepped forward, her glowing eyes shining with resolve. We'll go wherever we're needed, she said. We'll keep fighting until every last slaver is gone. The stranger smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Then let's get to work. The group spent the next few weeks preparing for their next mission. They trained, gathered supplies, and planned their strategy. The stranger and Kayla worked closely together, their partnership becoming the backbone of the rebellion. But as they prepared to leave the fortress, the stranger felt a pang of sadness. This place had become a home to him, and the people here had become his family. He knew he would miss it. Kayla noticed his hesitation and approached him one evening as he stood on the fortress walls, gazing out at the wasteland. "What's on your mind?" she asked. The stranger sighed, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I've spent so long running from my past," he said. "But now, for the first time, I feel like I've found a purpose. A reason to keep going." Kayla smiled, her expression warm. "You've always had a purpose. You just needed to find the right people to share it with." The stranger looked at her, his heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." Kayla nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "We're in this together. No matter what happens, we'll face it as a team." As the group set out on their next mission, the fortress stood behind them, a symbol of their victory and their hope for the future. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were ready. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. And now, they would bring that light to others. The group traveled across the wasteland, their hearts filled with purpose and their minds focused on the task ahead. The stranger led the way, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Kayla walked beside him, her glowing eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. As they journeyed, they encountered other groups of escaped slaves, each with their own stories of suffering and survival. The stranger and Kayla offered them hope, inviting them to join the rebellion and fight for a better future. One evening, as the group set up camp, Kayla approached the stranger with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what will happen after all of this is over?" she asked. The stranger looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and uncertainty. "I try not to think too far ahead," he admitted. "But I know one thing, we've started something that can't be stopped. Even if we're not around to see it, the fight for freedom will continue." Kayla nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I hope so. I just wish we could do more." The stranger placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "We're doing everything we can. And that's enough." As the days turned into weeks, the group's ranks grew. Freed slaves from across the wasteland joined their cause, drawn by the promise of hope and the chance to fight back. The stranger and Kayla trained them, teaching them how to defend themselves and work together as a team. But with each victory came new challenges. The slavers were relentless, and their attacks grew more frequent and brutal. The group faced constant danger, their resolve tested at every turn. One night, as the group prepared for another battle, the stranger gathered them together. "This won't be easy," he said, his voice steady but firm. "But we've faced worse. Remember why we're fighting: for our freedom, for our future, and for each other." The group nodded, their determination unwavering. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they were ready to face it together. The battle was fierce. The slavers had brought their full force, determined to crush the rebellion once and for all. But the rebels fought with everything they had, their courage fueled by the hope of a better future. The stranger and Kayla led the charge, their movements swift and precise. They fought side by side, their bond stronger than ever. But as the battle raged on, the stranger was struck by a sudden realization: this was only the beginning. The fight for freedom would never truly be over. There would always be those who sought to oppress and control, and there would always be those who fought back. As the sun rose over the battlefield, the slavers retreated, their forces weakened but not defeated. The rebels celebrated their victory, but the stranger knew the fight was far from over. That evening, as the group gathered around the campfire, the stranger stood before them, his expression thoughtful. "We've come a long way," he said. "But our journey is far from over. The fight for freedom will never end, but neither will our determination. We'll keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who can't." The group cheered, their spirits lifted by his words. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they were ready to face it together. The rebellion had grown stronger than ever. Freed slaves from across the galaxy joined their cause, united by the dream of a better future. The stranger and Kayla stood at the heart of it all, their bond unbreakable and their determination unwavering. But as the days passed, the stranger began to feel a sense of restlessness. He had spent so long fighting, so long running from his past, that he wasn't sure what to do now that the end was in sight. One evening, as the group prepared for their final mission, Kayla approached him. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her glowing eyes filled with concern. The stranger sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've spent so long fighting," he said. "I'm not sure what comes next." Kayla smiled, her expression warm. "You've given us all a chance to start over. Maybe it's time you did the same." The stranger looked at her, his heart filled with gratitude. "Maybe you're right." The final mission was their most dangerous yet. The slavers' leader, a ruthless alien warlord, had gathered his forces for one last stand. The rebels knew this was their chance to end the war once and for all. The battle was fierce. The slavers fought with everything they had, their desperation making them even more dangerous. But the rebels were ready. They fought with courage and determination, their spirits unbreakable. The stranger and Kayla led the charge, their movements swift and precise. They fought side by side, their bond stronger than ever. But as they neared the slavers' leader, they were faced with a difficult choice. The warlord stood before them, his eyes filled with rage. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You're nothing but insects to me. I'll crush you all." The stranger stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This ends now. No more slavery. No more fear. It's over." The warlord laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're a fool if you think you can stop me." The two clashed in a brutal fight. The warlord was strong, his attacks fueled by years of cruelty and power. But the stranger was relentless, his determination unshakable. In the end, it was Kayla who delivered the final blow. As the warlord lunged at the stranger, she struck from behind, her weapon piercing his armor. The warlord fell to the ground, his reign of terror finally over. The battle was won. The slavers were defeated, and the galaxy was free. The rebels celebrated their victory, their hearts filled with joy and relief. As the sun rose over the battlefield, the stranger stood atop a hill, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Kayla joined him, her expression thoughtful. "What now?" she asked. The stranger smiled, his heart filled with hope. "Now, we rebuild. We create a new world, one where no one has to live in fear." Kayla nodded, a small smile on her lips. "We couldn't have done it without you." The stranger looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "And I couldn't have done it without you." As the days passed, the rebels began to rebuild. The galaxy was transformed, its scars slowly healing as the people worked together to create a better future. The stranger and Kayla stood at the heart of it all, their bond unbreakable and their determination unwavering. But as the galaxy began to heal, the stranger knew it was time for him to move on. He had spent so long fighting, so long running from his past, that he wasn't sure what came next. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the stranger approached Kayla. "I have to go," he said, his voice filled with regret. Kayla's eyes filled with sadness, but she nodded. "I understand. You've given us all a chance to start over. Maybe it's time you did the same." The stranger smiled, his heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you. For everything." Kayla placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "No matter where you go, you'll always have a home here." The stranger nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I'll never forget that." As the stranger walked into the sunset, his heart filled with hope. He had spent so long fighting, so long running from his past, that he wasn't sure what came next. But he knew one thing, he was ready to find out. The galaxy was free, and the future was bright. And as the stranger disappeared into the horizon, he knew that his journey was far from over.